It is my pleasure to welcome to the truth now Sheriff Richard Mack. He was the sheriff of Graham County, Arizona, which is in the southeastern corner of the state. He is a Second Amendment defender and a political activist. Sheriff Mack, welcome to the truth.
Thank you. Political activist. I probably ought to change that to constitutional activist. But yeah, that definitely involves some politics. But that's the P word. It's become so corrupt now. I don't even like to use it anymore.
Well, I share your concern. I think that's a legitimate observation. So you brought a lawsuit against the federal government in connection with the passage of the Brady Act, which evidently severely limited people's Second Amendment rights. And the federal government was seeking to compel you, as I understand it, to enforce their law that you felt was unconstitutional. Did I summarize it correctly?
That's spot on, man. I'm telling you, it shocked me at the time. And John, quite honestly, it still shocks me today that they had the arrogance and the nerve to do that and send it out to every sheriff in the country. And you know how they sent it out? They had agents of the BATF go to every sheriff's association meeting in every state and hand deliver our marching orders as to what we had to do to obey the federal government in enforcing their gun control laws for them. Yeah.
Well, the model has been turned completely upside down. The Constitution specifically says those rights not specifically delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states. And the actors in the federal government, presumably permanent Washington, the deep state, seem to feel like they are singularly in charge of running the show. And to hell with the Constitution. It's their way or the highway, for lack of a better explanation to me. So tell us about the lawsuit that you brought and why you brought it.
First, I brought it to because I will not violate my oath for them or anyone else. I took my oath of office seriously. I love the Constitution. The Founding Fathers knew what they were doing when they promulgated the Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights, which was added a couple of years later after the first part of the Constitution was announced and disseminated. So first, I'm not going to violate my oath for anyone, especially a corrupt federal government. Secondly, I wanted to defend and protect and preserve the Second Amendment, which the Brady Bill clearly violated. And finally, I wanted to protect the office of sheriff from government overreach. And this bill, our decision, our ruling written by Justice Scalia was actually known as the anti-commandeering ruling. And very appropriate so, because they were trying to commandeer the office of the sheriff, and it would make us accountable and answerable to the federal government instead of the people that elected us. And they threatened to arrest us if we failed to comply. And that's true too. And I can't believe how crazy this was, that they could threaten to arrest someone who's completely out of their jurisdiction, who has absolutely nothing to do with them except maybe reporting crime stats to the FBI. And it made our constitutional republic stand on its head. And every facet of it I could not take, but those three main things: I won't violate my oath, I will protect the Second Amendment, and I will defend the office of sheriff. And we did all three, and we won.
Well, God love you, and I appreciate what you have done. So where does the Brady Act stand now? As I understood it, weren't there a series of legislative acts over a number of years that really, when you zoomed out, were just designed to deprive people or water down their Second Amendment rights?
It wasn't going to just water it down. It was going to completely destroy it. So there were Brady bills. We fought, and I was the first sheriff to start all this, and I'm proud to brag of that. You know, I love that I did that. But I also love the person who gave me the inspiration for it, the good Lord and my wife. And if it hadn't been for both of them, this would have never happened. And so Brady Bill 2 was introduced by Howard Metzenbaum from New York just 2 weeks after I filed on February 28th, 1994, he introduced Brady Bill 2 on March 14th, 1994. And so we found out, we did a lot of searching, and the Gun Owners of America started checking into it, and they found that there were 5 bills waiting. And yes, it would have completely regulated FFLs, or gun shop owners, out of existence. It would have completely regulated gun shows out of existence. It would have regulated ammunition out of existence, and regulated most guns out of existence. And so, yes, it was going to completely gut the Second Amendment, not just water it down, but completely gut it.
So we see attempts to deprive people of their civil liberties and their rights under the Constitution. We see efforts to censor people and deprive them of their First Amendment rights. We saw a 2020 election, and nowhere in the country was it more evident than in Arizona, in my own home state of Georgia, that an election was stolen and people's vote was they were deprived of their franchise. Where do you see this coming from? I mean, these have got to be pretty powerful forces that are able to pull this stuff off and basically, as Obama said, change the fabric of America. Is that where it's coming from?
It's followed a long train. But I will tell you, the abuses really accelerated immensely during COVID-19. And I think the powers that be, even if it's just our corrupt government and the corrupt deep state of Washington, D.C., and it doesn't go any more sinister than that or more conspiratorial than that, they learned that they could get away with anything. They learned on 2024 or 2020 and 2022 that they could get away with election fraud and stealing our vote. They also learned starting in 2021, maybe the very beginning of it, maybe 2019, that we would just fall in line and bow down and kiss the ring of the wonderful government that was saving us from this horrible COVID-19 and coronavirus, whatever they wanted to call it at the time. And Scalia, in this decision, addresses all of that. And this came out June of 1997. And he said this, in this decision now, folks, there it is. You need to get copies of this. Every one of you should get a copy of this off our website, cspoa.org, cspoa.org. And there's no markup in this. This thing costs $2. You can get 3 of them for $5. I'm not making money off of this, folks. I want you to have it. It's the most important 10th Amendment decision in the history of America, and one of the most powerful cases ever in the history of the Supreme Court. So get this, what Scalia says. First, in his introduction, he said that the question presented by the CLEOs, he called us the chief law enforcement officer, the CLEO, chief law enforcement officers. That's what he called the sheriffs. And he said, must be sought in historical understanding and perspective. Well, that's exactly what he does. He takes us through a history lesson. He quotes the founders. He quotes the Federalist Papers. He quotes the Federalist Papers. When was the last time that happened in any Supreme Court decision? Or that they just take us through a history lesson instead of trying to create something new according to political correctness of the day. And so he said this, and this is Federalist 51. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. Let me pause there and ask a question. How does a double security arise to the rights of the people? Continuing, quote, the different governments will control each other. At the same time that each will be controlled by itself. Any question, folks, as to whether or not the federal government will control itself? Then the other governments, no matter where they are or who they are, in the other branches of government, that's why we have 3 branches of government, so that we'll keep each other in check and keep each other in our proper lane of traffic, or just proper lanes. So it's our job as other governments, when we see criminal activity within another branch of government, that we correct it. Now, get this one. We have held, however, this is another quote from this decision. We have held, however, that state legislatures are not subject to federal direction. Folks, you know why we're not? Because the states form the federal government, not the other way around. Historically speaking, they are our servant. They were our creation. And we delegated a few discrete enumerated powers to them. In fact, Scalia says that in here too. Right here on page 7 of this little most powerful book in the world, folks, he says, conferred upon Congress of not all governmental powers. Well, if they don't have all governmental powers like they pretend they have, what kind do they have? Scalia answers, but only discrete enumerated ones. Well, how do we keep it that way? What is our job in keeping the powers of the federal government discrete enumerated, or in other words, discrete limited? He says this, to keep it that way, quote, which implication was rendered expressed by the 10th Amendment. Folks, the states have to enforce the 10th Amendment. We have to tell the federal government, you can't do that. You don't have any authority. And by the way, John, while we're on this subject, I've actually gone through the Constitution and I wanted to enumerate or number the powers that were delegated to the federal government relative to law enforcement. So my question to all of you right now, how many law enforcement powers were delegated to the new central government? Most people say 0. It's not 0. It's almost 0. It's 5. 1, treason. The federal government's supposed to be enforcing and investigating and punishing treason. Next one, counterfeiting. Next one, felonies committed on the high seas or piracies. Next one, Article 4, Section 4. The United States shall protect our borders from invasion. And then number 5 is violations of international laws or treaties. That's it. So as you quoted in the 10th Amendment, the powers not delegated to the federal government belong to the states or the people. They belong right here. They belong with us. And so this is so obvious. Our job in the states to protect the civil rights of the American people that the federal government habitually and routinely violate every day.
Well, that is a very good civics lesson, and I appreciate your educating us about that. And it seems like the model has been turned upside down, and I don't know how we get it back. But one of those powers is to protect our border. And you're right there in the midst of the biggest border crisis that this country has ever experienced. What do you think is going on? Why is the Biden administration opening the borders and allowing these very dangerous, law-breaking, and President Trump alleges crazy people to come into our country? What possible advantage could that have for our country?
They are willing to sacrifice national security for their political monopoly. And as you already know, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens voted in 2020 and 2022. Now they've quadrupled that amount, and they've continued to get these illegal aliens on the Democrat rolls to vote. That is why they have done it. They were willing to risk national security because we know for a fact that tens of thousands of international terrorists from the Middle East have also infiltrated our country, along with the Latin American population south of Mexico, south of the Mexico border. They're willing to do that in order to gain complete control and power from Hawaii to Bangor, Maine. That is why they did this. They were willing to sacrifice all of this, and including sacrifice the presidency of Joe Biden, because they knew people didn't like him anyway. They knew he was old. They knew he was incapable of continuing as president. He said he would only be with it one term. but his pride and arrogance got a hold of him, and he wanted to stay again. He's mad at the Democrats for kicking him out, even right now. But the reason they set all that up through Joe Biden is so that he could be the sacrificial lamb, so that people would get mad for a while, and then they would turn to someone else, and that someone else now also did this. But they've all seen that they got away with it, and so that's now why they think Kamala can win, even when we all know she's not qualified, and she's been a horrible vice president of the worst president in American history, and that's Joe Biden. But as they said in that criminal investigation on Biden, he is not mentally competent to stand trial. And I have said that actually for the last 5 years.
As have I. But in addition to his mental capacity, I prefer to actually focus on his corruption. Here's a guy who he and his family, he's made his son the bag man, have collected $30 to $60 million that we know of from our enemies, not foreign actors, but our enemies. And the fact that they're allowing him to get away with it scot-free just shocks my conscience. And I just fundamentally don't understand it unless there's a nod and a wink that, oh, he served the country for 50 years, let's give him a retirement plan. I don't know. That's the best spin I can put on it. But there's certainly no authority or legitimacy behind that if that is, in fact, the case.
Yeah. Yeah. But that is why they've done it. And then after they get in, they know they can get away with anything because they're going to control, pretty much as they do right now, the courts and most of the legislatures and most of the executive branch. So our only hope is that the sheriffs of this country will stand against all of this, start investigating this criminal and treasonous activities, and start erecting the barriers, as Madison warned us, county by county. There is no hope in Washington, D.C. That is never going to change. The likelihood of Washington ever changing is not going to happen. But the sheriffs can erect the barriers and make the federal government irrelevant in our counties.
Well, I ran for Attorney General of Georgia 2 years ago, and I don't believe that I participated in an honest, fair election, although I've never cried foul, accepted the results, and moved on. But I'm 100% sure in my heart and in my brain, based on the evidence that I've seen, that 2020 was stolen in Georgia without question. There are 3,200 duplicate ballots on the Secretary of State's own website. Then there are 14,000 people who were registered to vote, and if you alphabetize them by their first name, their voter IDs are perfectly sequential, which is impossible to have happened. Then there are some 300,000 missing ballot images. Yet our Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, and our governor says there's nothing to see here. And just as the state elections board really in Georgia has started to display a conscience and have imposed rules for the 2024 election, empowering local elections officials to deep dive into an election that does not appear on its face to be worthy of certifying. If there are irregularities, that they have a timeout to sort it out before certifying the election. Now, our Governor Kemp, who says that he's for Donald Trump now, is seeking authority from the Attorney General to determine if he can remove the members of the state elections board. So it just seems to me that anytime you make progress on election reform in the name of elections integrity, that these people find a way to eradicate it, which to me is just them saying, we're going to steal the election and there's nothing you can do about it. Have I got that wrong?
I've said that exact quote. They have done everything in their power, everything. Kemp, everyone in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and a few other states, but all the swing states, they've done everything in those states to guarantee the probability and the possibility of cheating. That's it. That's all they've done the last 4 years.
So it's my belief that Donald Trump, along with Robert Kennedy Jr. and Elon Musk and Tulsi Gabbard, may actually be our salvation. Do you think that we've got a chance to get it across the line?
Only if the cheaters allow it. And I say that for a reason. I believe that the cheaters may want Trump back in so that they can have the violence and dash the beginning of civil war, because the violence won't stop. They're going to blame Trump for it. And it's going to paralyze our nation. And I think they want that. They've been wanting to promote violence. They've been promoting violence for a long time. The left doesn't care if the left commits violence. And I think that's one of the possibilities. Another intel report that we have received is that Hamas and other international terrorists that have already infiltrated our country because of the Biden and Harris policies, they're going to attack from within on October 7th to commemorate the Palestinian, what they call genocide of 1 year ago. These people committed these murders and tortured and burned children alive, and yet turned around and blamed it on Israel. And I don't care where violence comes from. I denounce every bit of it. If Israel's done anything like that, I denounce what they have done. But I know for a fact Hamas was involved, and Hamas already took hostages, refuses to get them back, and now Israel just got one released, and I'm for all that. But if they cannot settle their disputes without killing and maiming and torturing children, then I will never support any of their claims of Israel's being mean to us.
I've said several times that I feel that the Palestinians have been abused. They have been mistreated historically. But here's the problem that I have. When you behead children and you kill pregnant women and you murder 200 people at a pop concert, you deprive yourself of any sympathy or any voice to be heard. And so I do think that there's probably another side to the story, but they deprive us of any sympathy extending towards the Palestinians. So, I mean, that's just my take, and for whatever it's worth. Now, you are a seasoned law enforcement officer, and a really good one at that. And I have been a student of JFK's assassination for 60 years after I was home from the fourth grade with the flu on November 22nd, 1963. I know that assassination inside and out, and most of the people that were in Dealey Plaza, most of the people that were suspected of being in Dealey Plaza, the gunman, and et cetera, et cetera. I've concluded, as scholars have, based on my reading, not my information, but on people like David Talbot and MacArthur, who wrote The Unspeakable, that the CIA killed Kennedy. I see such striking resemblances and parallels between the Kennedy assassination and the attempt on President Trump's life on July the 13th, just barely 2 months ago. Do you share my observations?
Yes. And I've studied the JFK assassination quite a bit too. In fact, I've been to Dealey Plaza, as probably you have, to look it all over. And first of all, I felt it was eerie, because it looked exactly like it was in mint condition, like you see it on the movies.
They have preserved it very well.
It's very preserved. And I went behind the picket fence and read the graffiti back there and all that. It was almost spooky, but we also went up into the museums and saw the magic bullet that went through Connolly and came out in pristine shape and all this. I have come to the conclusion, I want to see if you do, that Oswald never even fired a shot.
I don't even think he was in the sniper's nest. There are witnesses who saw him in the break room 5 minutes before the first shot was fired, and the manager of the school book depository rushed through the break room with a Dallas police officer who turned and looked at Oswald and said, "Who is that?" And the manager said, "Oh, he works for us." He was sitting in the same seat drinking the same Coca-Cola. And I just don't think, and he was not out of breath. So,
Yeah, he wouldn't have had time. He wouldn't have had time to run 5 floors.
yeah, I think he was exactly what he said he was. And that was a patsy, and that he was set up to take the fall. Now, do you know about this story about the Arizona Munitions Company, and that there was a white van in Butler on July the 13th, and there are videos showing the van being towed away, and it was reportedly full of explosives. And the van was titled to an Arizona company. And I'm sorry, I didn't think to get the details explicitly on this before we came on.
I have honestly not seen anything about that.
Okay, well, I'm going to email you a YouTube video that you can watch that lays it out. There is actual video of the van. I remember distinctly hearing reports about the van in the hours immediately after the attempted assassination. But this kid who drove the van from Arizona to Butler is the son of the owner of the munitions company in Arizona. And guess what? His parents filed a missing persons report the day after Butler, and he has not been seen or heard from since. Now, that's not a conspiracy theory. That is hard, cold fact based on what I have read and what has been reported. And to me, that is maybe the most significant and important fact that needs to be looked at.
Well, even Crooks, the guy who was up on the roof, that the Secret Service totally ignored, even after they were warned about him. They totally ignored it. But he even said in a video it's still out there, "You got the wrong guy." He's making that statement. You got to like he's challenging us. You stupids! You think it was me, or you think it was just me? You've got the wrong guy. If the suspect is saying that in a dying declaration of what was really going on, you've heard none of the follow-up on that.
This kid from Arizona that drove the van, he looks a lot like Crooks. He has long blonde hair, and this video I'm going to send you has pictures of the mystery man that I'm talking about with pictured next to Crooks, not in the same picture, but they've taken the picture of the guy and the picture of Crooks and put them together. They look very similar to one another, but they also put Crooks on the roof after he had been shot. And the suggestion is that the guy that they killed is not Crooks, but it's this kid from Arizona. I'm going to send it to you.
I didn't think Crooks looked like his younger pictures. The guy that was on the roof, he doesn't look like his younger pictures. And I commented about that. So, yeah. So another thing is, I will tell you 100%, Marilyn Monroe did not commit suicide. Neither did Epstein, and neither did Vince Foster. No way on all three. For sure, the most evidence is Marilyn Monroe. She did not commit suicide. So there's a lot of these conspiracy theories that you start delving into them, they're very factual. But I will tell you, I know for a fact that the sheriffs have stood against the federal government. They can continue to stand against the federal government. And if we get 1,000 sheriffs who stand unitedly against the incursions and criminal activity of the federal government, we can keep them at bay. And I know for a fact that the federal bureaucracies do not want to fight with the sheriffs. If we could just get the sheriffs to unite in that, we could protect the people from the rest of this.
I encourage some sheriffs in Georgia to go investigate 2020 and go seize the ballots, because they are evidence of a crime having been committed, especially in Fulton County.
We've pushed that as well.
I didn't seem to make much progress on it. So coming up in just a few days, actually, September the 6th and 7th, you are convening a summit of law enforcement officers as well as opinion leaders and scholars in Orlando. Tell us about the Foundation for Freedom Conference coming up in Orlando in just a few weeks.
Well, it's because we think this is such a pivotal time, a crucial time for America. We called this emergency meeting. The public is also welcome because we, the people, have got to be involved in this. And so everyone, you can see the information for this on the front page of cspoa.org. And you can be there.
And we'll put the link up on our site along with this video, and there is the flyer for the meeting, and we'll also put a link in the comments on our podcast. But we're also on the radio, so it's kind of hard for our radio audience to see the flyer. But let's repeat that you can go find it at cspoa.org.
And while you're there, join the CSPOA posse. Join the posse, become a part of the solution, and help us help you and train you to work with your sheriff and create a posse for him.
Sheriff Richard Mack, thank you so much for joining The Truth today, and we really have enjoyed our conversation and look forward to many more in the future.
John, I would love to come back with you. You're spot on, man. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be in your company, and thank you for your service, and thank you for what you're doing. Keep fighting. Thank you for joining us on this week's edition. We hope that you enjoyed the program, learn from the program, and will be motivated to help work to keep this country the free land that it is. We've got to straighten this mess out, or our children and grandchildren aren't going to have a country. And that's my biggest fear. This is The Truth. I'm John Gordon. I've told you the truth, and I'll be back next Saturday with another edition of our program, and we will be coming to you from New York City. And we might just make a pass by the Roosevelt Hotel and see what it looks like a year after we were visited there last. Have a great weekend, everybody.